Joe Biden is an interesting guy because he has friendships across the aisle, friendships that have been known for a very long time, John McCain, Lindsey Graham. And he really does believe that he can work across the aisle. But some of his longtime friends have been a little bit disappointing recently in the events that have happened since the election. Here he is talking about one example of that.
Lindsey Graham, a friend of yours, he has said things about you nicer than anything has been said about me. I wish somebody would say the things about me that Lindsey Graham said about you. Do you think you guys can patch it up and work together?
Lindsey's been a personal disappointment because I was a personal friend of his.
And so there he's talking about the fact that Lindsey Graham is doing what Lindsey Graham is gonna do, which is go along with whatever Trump wants. And what Trump wants right now is for no one to acknowledge that Joe Biden won the election. And that video is a little bit fun, obviously, because he's distancing himself from Lindsey Graham, who's a terrible person. But I see it as potentially a little bit of a learning opportunity. Like maybe it's a reminder to Joe Biden that the gap between the two sides isn't necessarily as shallow as you might think, or as easy to bridge, or as divorced from the consequences there will be for his ability to govern. But what do you two think about that relationship?
Yeah, I hope you're right. I don't know the extent to which Joe Biden's fetish for bipartisanship is going to trip him up. It is like the proverbial Charlie Brown and Lucy. They are continuously holding that football out, and he continuously goes after it. But I mean, it is refreshing to hear this. But I really need to know if it's going to go beyond just that interview into policy and decisions about bipartisanship.
Yeah, I think I don't know if Biden totally understands the post-shame world we live in. He of course is going to feel I'm glad that he's expressing disappointment in someone like Lindsey Graham, who I think everybody else in America knew was a little bit of a kind of flip-floppy suck up. But I think that Biden is living in a world where people are capable of feeling shame. And I don't know if he's going to constantly Lucy the football that over and over again, if he's going to keep trying to recreate a world where shame exists. But I actually think that it's good that he's trying to. I think a lot of people who voted for him, especially people who flipped in the suburbs from Trump voters to Biden voters, especially people who are kind of moderate who showed up for Biden this time. I think they want to at least see the compassion kabuki. They want Biden to go through the motions of being I am trying to work across the aisle, even though I think you guys and me all know that that's probably not going to be as easy as it was when Joe Biden was in the Senate.
Yeah, and so the thing I'm worried about is a repeat of the Obama years, where the first few years were a lot of it was spent on trying to work with the Republicans. And then, maybe a case could be made that he seemed to have learned at least a little bit in the second term, but by then he didn't have as much control over legislation anyway because of the intervening elections. And so, yeah, I'm worried about that. And the difficulty that Obama had in trying to reach across the aisle then, that's the Republican Party that's pre-Trump, pre-QAnon candidates actually winning elections. There were a lot of people who didn't like Obama, and the Tea Party immediately arose, and all of that. He didn't come into office. Well, while they considered him illegitimate, he at least had a couple of months. Biden, he isn't even in office, and they're already refusing to admit that he won an election that he won by many millions of votes. And so it would seem that it's more obviously going to be difficult to work with them. I wonder if that's going to get through.
I certainly hope so. Again, I don't. Actually, no, I don't put any hope in that. I'm sorry, I tried to. I don't put any hope in that because it is obvious what you're saying is 100% true, right? Any rational person would look at what's happening in between the election and inauguration day and realize, oh wow, we have a new level of intransigence. We have a new level of opposition. I would argue that it's the same level of opposition and they just didn't recognize it before. It's just a little bit louder this time.
I would say that with Biden as president, the like traditional Republican media smear machine is missing a couple of its most important weapons that it used during the Biden or during the Obama years, which is the racism of people on the right on this party. Like they were able to froth people into hating Barack Obama partly just because he was a black man. And when Hillary Clinton was running against Donald Trump, they were to froth people into hating Hillary Clinton. She had a lot of weaknesses as a candidate, obviously, but there was a component of real like sexist hatred for her during the campaign. Joe Biden is somebody that is missing the attributes the Republicans typically use to get their people to hate a candidate. So I wonder how they're going to try to attack who Joe Biden is now that he doesn't belong to any of the groups that they traditionally demonize.
Yeah, my gut is saying right now they've convinced a lot of their followers that he's either just a communist or being controlled by the Chinese communists, or for a smaller percentage of their base, but growing, that he's a satanic pedophile who eats and rapes children. That can get some people angry. I don't know if it's gonna be as large as the number of racists in America, but I do wonder one thing though. They blocked a lot of what Obama wanted to do, and the last couple of years was just a standing filibuster on every piece of legislation, no judges, all of that. But for the first few years, they really strung Obama along. Like he negotiated on the ACA with the Republicans for like more than a full year and got none of their votes. A lot of time was wasted on that. With Joe Biden, he's coming in with them refusing to acknowledge that he even won. And we'll see if after inauguration that really changes it all. And there's gonna be a lot of pressure on them not to acknowledge him or to work with him, because not only do you have Trump who's gonna be goading the Republican base the entire time, but he's also going to be attacking anyone in Fox News who sort of even implies that there's a chance to work with Biden because Biden is fundamentally evil from their point of view. And if Fox does it, then OAN and Newsmax are gonna attack them. I wonder if that might almost help to cure Joe Biden of any belief he has that he can work with them and avoid him falling into the trap of spending like a year and a half trying to create some sort of bipartisan infrastructure bill or immigration reform bill. Like I wonder if their extremism might undercut their ability to string Biden along like they did with Obama.
Yeah, I think Biden's fetish for bipartisanship is only supplanted by his penchant for austerity. And I think the language that we're hearing coming from Republicans right now tells me that I think Joe Biden will probably cross over hot coals in order to get that bipartisanship austerity. So I think he can actually get it done, and it's going to be damaging to all of the working people in this country.
I do think though that we're living in really unprecedented times, and if Joe Biden and the Biden administration can win the messaging war around what the Biden administration is trying to do and what Republicans are refusing to work with them on, then I think that that's something that will take on new urgency for Republicans. I think a lot of Republicans really think they're gonna flip the House in 2022. I don't think every single Republican member of the House that is up for re-election in 2022 wants obstructionism to be their main achievement of the last 2 years, especially because obstructionism is killing people and getting people kicked out of their houses and completely derailing people's financial futures and changing people's family plans and everything like that. I think that it is really, the Biden administration, I think it is important for them to make sure that it looks like they're trying to work with Republicans, and to make sure that when it doesn't work, that they have no problem burning sources. If somebody is the one person that is the obstruction, they should call that person out. They should be relentless in hammering why things are not moving forward. And I think if they do that, if they say, look, we tried and they stopped us, and here's how they stopped us, and just kind of perennially produce receipts, I think that could actually be an advantage to Democrats and progressives in 2022.
The thing I might disagree with you on is I'm not necessarily I'm not necessarily convinced of one of two things. Either that obstruction as a strategy for the next 2 years isn't necessarily in their political interests, or at the very least, that they won't at least think that it's in their political interests. I mean, that is how they rode out the last couple of years of Barack Obama, and largely just obstruction, not necessarily of like the Dems as a majority party, but obstruction of the function of government was largely how they spent most of the Trump years too. Like they do seem to fall into that mode pretty readily. And I think like if they try to pitch themselves as just the resistance against, like Beijing's influence on DC, I think some Republicans would like that. I honestly don't know. I'm honestly not sure if it would work or not.
I think that feels so far from the lives of people that are directly impacted by the pandemic right now. Like Americans have so much bigger and immediate concerns than being like, but is Beijing influencing our government? That seems so far. That seems so far away. If you have like 5 members of your family hospitalized for COVID and no health care, like it's like there's something so much more important. It's so much more immediate that I'm not sure that like foreign policy scaremongering, even if it's based in something that people should be worried about, is necessarily going to be a message that Americans really have the bandwidth to process right now.
I hope. I don't know. I mean, look, that's largely how they spent the pandemic, and Biden did win, which is evidence that not helping people out during the worst domestic crisis of our lives is not a great strategy. But they gained seats in the House. So to what extent is it a Trump thing as opposed to the Republicans literally left us to die, and not only that, but encouraged us to get out there and die. Yeah. And they didn't really suffer much. Mitch McConnell got reelected easily. Most of the Republicans are up. This is like a big year for Republican seats in the Senate, and they did pretty well. But we'll see. By the way, I want to mention one other thing just in case we forget. This is one of my, I guess like sort of like a hobby, is I like to remind people of apparent criminality of our elected officials, even though it doesn't matter and they'll never suffer any consequences. So Graham not only won't acknowledge that Biden won, but remember that in like the week after the election, he was accused of pressuring Georgia to discard mail-in ballots, that he had this call, I believe it was with Raffensperger, or at least someone in his office, where he was encouraging them to just throw out the votes, which is an encouragement to voter fraud, which is based on my reading of the Georgia election laws is against the law. But he's a politician, so I didn't hear about that after maybe 48 hours after that story came out, that he was encouraging them to literally throw out thousands of votes. It's just, I guess he's a senator. I guess it's free.
Yeah, that is really frustrating. I think that, Biden talks about bipartisanship, and I think it is important for him to at least like make gestures as though he wants bipartisanship, but to completely let this all go without anybody suffering any consequences after Biden takes office, I think it sets a really bad precedent. Like as unpleasant as it is to be like, okay, well, now we got to start prosecuting members or allies of the last administration. That's unpleasant, but if you don't do it, the consequences are that everybody's always just gonna do whatever they want anyway and assume that nothing bad will happen to them. Unless it's a Democrat and a Republican takes over, because rules only apply to people on the left.
Also, Judd, only thing I would say extra to that is the only place I defer with her on that is that I suggest that Joe Biden doesn't even attempt at bipartisanship, because they don't. I suggest that we win this Senate and we run up the scoreboard. I know that's not gonna happen, but I think that's what he should do.
You think we're not gonna win the Senate?
Well, I hope we win the Senate. I don't think. Well, I thank you for making me get that correction. It's not. I think we're going to win the Senate. I don't think Joe Biden is going to run up the scoreboard by ignoring the Republicans with the majority in all 3 houses. I mean, in both houses and the White House. I don't believe that he's going to take advantage of that. But I also firmly believe that he should not try to capitulate or triangulate with Republicans at all.
Well, I would say I think the best, if he wants to lose, control the House and possibly control the Senate again in 2 years, the best way he can possibly do that is to not deliver for the American people. And arguably, if they don't pass substantial pieces of legislation, especially after the Trump years, then arguably they deserve to lose those seats. So we'll have to see. I'm hoping that it's a new Democratic Party. Those hopes always work out.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, I really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.